Do you think that we're going to get a soft landing, or do you think that with the state of the consumer the way that it is, do you think that we're bracing more for a hard economic contraction?
I fall into the hard crash camp. I mean, but I could be wrong. I mean, soft landing is entirely possible. I mean, there are shock absorbers. I mean, one of them, for example, is I read the other day that like 25% of the 25% of the workers in this country are working for some form of government, and so they're not necessarily going to get laid off or lose their job. They're kind of locked in, right? And they've got COLA increases. So it's not maybe as vulnerable an economy as it has been in the past. But my opinion is that when it tips, it'll cascade on itself fairly quickly. There will be, it's leverage on the way up and it's leverage on the way down. And everybody in this economy is carrying a lot of debt. Everybody's very heavily leveraged. If that debt starts to go bad and people can't make their payments, the cars get repossessed, the car prices fall, the auto manufacturers don't need to make as many cars, they lay people off, people who get laid off can't make their mortgage payments, those houses get put up for sale, and it compounds itself. It's just one after the next. And two very good instances of this, and I think at smaller scale, but they were meaningful, are the dot-com bubble in 2000, which was really restricted mostly to technology stuff, but NASDAQ went down 80%, U.S. stock market went down 50%, and the housing bubble of 2008, where the housing stuff went down 90%, some of the stocks, and the stock market itself went down 50%, and overall general stocks, and unemployment shot up, and government deficits shot up, and you had real pain. And I just don't see how this episode doesn't ultimately look like those two episodes. It may be taking a little longer, and in both of those cases, there were precursors to the big down. And I was investing in both those cases. I remember 2000, March of 2000 was the top, and some of the really high-flying speculative stuff kind of started to blow up. But Cisco, IBM, all those guys, they were fine. It wasn't until a year later that all the big names started to really fall apart. And so, it takes time. The economy is an ocean liner, and you can't just change direction on a whim. And we've had a bunch of years of growth, and we had a bunch of financial stimulus in 2020. And there's a lot of money out there flowing around. And so, but, the Fed's trying to sop it up with these higher rates, and slowly but surely at the margin, people will stop doing silly stuff because money's not free anymore. And at the margin, think about, just as an example, think of all the unicorns there used to be and all those dot-com companies and just high-tech companies out in California that weren't profitable, that were funded by venture capitalists, right? Think of all those employees who thought they had millions of dollars in stock options and they had nice big salaries. I know some of these people because my kids have friends that worked in these companies. And now the venture capital's dried up, and the venture capitalists are about to get their asses handed. And so the funding is dried up. And so if you're in one of those companies that's not making money, your job's at risk. And so, you had a pretty high paying, decent tech job, and guess what? Now it doesn't exist anymore because the funding is dried up. And so, you're not buying a car, you're not buying a house, you're not doing all the normal economic stuff. You're taking a job probably paying you less than what you were making, etc. So, these things, it takes time for these flows to occur, but the wheels grind slowly, but they grind surely. And so I having watched, I'm 66, I've been doing this since I was in my 20s. Having watched a bunch of these cycles, I can just say with high confidence, I just know that's what's coming. It's coming. It's it's taking a little longer than I thought, but it's coming. Look, when you make money expensive, everyone who's been borrowing money cheap and thought that was easy to do suddenly discovers, holy shit, I got a problem. And so if they've got to roll their debt over, one, they may not even be able to roll it. They may have to pay it back, and they don't have the money to pay it back with. Or two, if they do roll it, it's not going to be as cheap as it used to be, and they're going to spend more money on it. And both of those things are bad for them, their personal balance sheet and whatever business they're in. So their business balance sheet, whatever business they're in. So, and that's actually, it's ironic. It's one of the sad things about what the Fed has done. Some of the problems that we've had with inflation are supply-oriented problems. We had bottlenecks and issues. We need more supply of certain things. Well, how do you get more supply of certain things? Well, you spend CapEx to create, capital goods that then give you supply. Well, okay, how do you finance CapEx? Well, either equity financing or debt. Well, when debt was cheap, it was easier to finance CapEx and bring on that additional supply. You jam the interest rates up, and then suddenly, it's not so easy to finance the CapEx and create the supply that you need to get the inflation down. So it's not, it's not as though these interest rates being higher is a definite guarantee of we're going to get inflation under control. They're parts of higher interest rates, which do slow the economy and which help get inflation under control. There are other parts which don't. I mean, the debt doom loop of the government and the difficulty of adding capacity, which is needed, which you need to add. So
the rate hikes are demand destruction focused, but they do not help with bringing supply back.
They don't help with supply. No, they actually work against that. And so I look at this chart as you post here, and I'm stunned at how big these numbers are, and they're dead ass serious. And I'll bet when this is all over, half of that money is going to money heaven. They're going to be a lot of people taking write-offs on this stuff. And and by the way, Joe, that's another thing I would add just on the overall economy. I think people forget how much people's spending habits are driven by their perceived level of wealth. And I think a lot of people in the middle to upper middle classes, their perceived level of wealth is kind of their retirement account, their stock account, and they look at it and they say, well, okay, I've got X thousands in my investment accounts, and oh my, look at that, it went up 20% this year. Great, I'll take a vacation to Europe. I've got I'm doing fine. Well, bring on the downturn that we're talking about, cut those stock accounts in half, which is what happened in 2000 and 2008, and suddenly that retirement account that you thought was nice and a certainty and growing and going to give you a nice retirement, and you were comfortable spending a little extra money, and it's like, holy shit, we got to cut back here. I got to make this car last longer. Europe, nope, that's off the table. All those nice expenditures, I'm trimming those. So there's in a financialized economy the way ours is, all of these markets send signals, and we as human beings, we tend to herd. I think one of the things is one of the fascinating herding behaviors that I've noticed of late, and I'm sure you have too, is the way the stock market's really recovered. I mean, if anyone had told me the stock market was going to come back close to its all-time high after it peaked in 21, after it fell 20% in 2022, I'd have said no way. No way, absolutely, it's impossible. And yet here we are. We're within a spitting distance of that high, and all because of AI. And AI is going to change the world, and we've got this huge product. Don't get me wrong, AI is really good. It's important. It will affect the world, but not to the tune that it should make the stock market do what it's doing. And also, if you look at the stock market, as I'm sure you're aware, and many of your listeners probably are too, 7 or 8 companies account for most of that gain. And so, look, to me, these are unhealthy signs. When you get a market with very narrow leadership, the way and this is a long time ago, but I was around in the 70s, the Nifty 50. There are 50 companies that you just could. The thought was you could pay any price for this. It doesn't matter. They're the best companies in the world. And forget about price. You just got to own these names. And of course, that ended very badly. The entire Nifty 50 was down 50%, and then in the next bear market in '73. And this has it rhymes, right? The history on this rhymes. These 7 companies, look, they're good companies. Don't get me wrong. Google's a fabulous company. Some of the others are pretty good companies too. But are they worth the kind of prices and multiples being paid in today's market? Debatable. Certainly debatable if the economy gets a lot softer. Well, they'll be around, but they just won't be. They won't be where they are today. Cisco was the hot stock of the .com era, and they provided all the right routers which built out the internet. It was a thing of beauty. It was a fabulous company, but it traded up to just an enormous PE multiple and price sales multiple, and then in the bust it fell. Those multiples came out of it, and it still hasn't reached its all-time high. It's still a good company, but these valuation bubbles. This is hurting, right? People just they everything works until it doesn't, and then it doesn't work at all. So you got to be careful. That's the nature of of crowd psychology. I would just say to all viewers that be very optimistic, because this is a tough period, I think, for the country, the economy, and we're in this fourth turning, which is going to a lot of turmoil. We all know it, politics, etc. And I would just say try to take a longer term view and take care of yourself and your family, and recognize that better times will come as we come out the other side of this. But in order to come out the other side of this, we need to return to a sound money standard. And that's what Bitcoin's all about. That's what gold is all about. And that's what those of us, that's what Robert Kennedy is now talking about. And so I think if anyone wants to contribute to that effort, that's a worthwhile thing to do, because the sooner we get to a sound money standard, in my opinion, the better off things will be for our kids and grandkids, which is certainly kind of why I'm working as hard as I work today, So sound money is, my byline on Twitter, and I think I stole it from Marty Bent, so I should give him credit, but my byline on Twitter is "Fix the money, fix the world." And I really do believe that's true. at the base layer, the money's broken. Fiat people have really, they've screwed this thing up massively. They've caused so much suffering in terms of inflation and the Cantillon effect and the way poor people have suffered at the hands of billionaires. I mean, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. But it's going to end. The good news, that's the bad news. The good news is it's going to end. And the reason it's going to end, there are two great technological innovations that get me more excited about anything else I've ever seen in my life. And they are the internet, which is decentralizing information and allowing Joe Rogan to be more relevant than CNN or Fox News, and Bitcoin, which is decentralizing money and allowing an alternative money standard that the government can't screw around with, and so that we can save and know that our savings won't be debased. And I don't think today much of the world fully understands just how important those two innovations are, but I think they're earth-shattering. And so I think in the next 10, 20 years, things are going to get so much better as those innovations roll out at full scale. So I would say, as bad as some of the shit is today, be optimistic. That's my message.